Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley podcast show. I'm coming to you from the North Shore of Oahu, where weekly I interview some of the world's most inspiring people from business, philanthropy, and entertainment. I love collecting humans, and these are some of my favorites I've found along the way. This podcast is brought to us by Capita Financial Network.
Do you need help with the next steps of your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call or schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hi, welcome to the Lindsay Hadley podcast show. Today we have a new friend of mine, Brandt Kucharski. We're so excited to have Brandt on. We recently were introduced by a mutual friend. And as I heard about his background and what he's accomplished, I was like, you need to come on the show. And he's so wonderful to join us today. Brandt, thanks for coming on.
I'm so excited to be here. And, I hear I'm the first accountant you've had on your podcast. Is that true?
That's absolutely right. First accountant that I know of. I mean, some people might have had the accounting background, but that's really fun. So, Brandt, so you've had this amazing background, and probably every listener at some point has engaged one of the companies that you helped build that went ultimately public that everybody knows, which is Grubhub. That's a brand that everybody knows. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your journey there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Holiday Heroes, which is your pet charity. And you and I jammed on that for a minute, just how great it is to get involved in a cause that, we care about and the joy it brings in our lives. And then lastly, learn a little bit about what you're doing at Ethos, the new SaaS company, and, just everything that you've been working on today. So why don't we start off by having you share a little bit about yourself, your background, and a little bit about Grubhub. I think we have a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of investors and high net worth people that have had a lot of success that listen to the podcast. And I think they love to hear the journey. So any details about that would be so wonderful.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Oh, totally cool. I'm excited to share. I started my career as an accountant, and I did many, many years at a big accounting firm. And, one day I started to get a little bored. I got kind of tired of working 100-hour weeks, January, February, March. And I started kind of dip my toes into joining a startup. I was lucky that my wife was one of the first salespeople at Pandora. So she kind of got the startup bug, and I got to kind of see what she was doing a little bit. And then she introduced me to the founders of Grubhub. We're about a few million of revenue overall, less than 50 people. And I got to join the company as the first kind of finance accounting hire as chief accounting officer controller. And, we were basically in Chicago and, maybe one other city a little bit, and then just raise a whole bunch of money from Benchmark and some of these other great VCs and really put us on a path to go public and scale the company.
Amazing. And so your role there, like you were helping, tell us a little bit about your role and like what it was like to be in a company growing at that kind of lightning speed.
Well, when I joined Grubhub, we were, very, very small. We're, $1 million or so of revenue, and we raised some money from Bill Gurley at Benchmark. Took in some money, and we raised some money later, and we just started to expand from one city to 2 to 10 to 100, made a few M&A acquisitions that really started to really hit the pedal on the gas, and we really had a plan to go public. And my job was to help take them public on the accounting side, get ready for the S1 filing, really support the CFO. We brought in a wonderful CFO about a year before we went public, or two, a guy named Adam DeWitt, and he was a banker. It's really interesting, I think, when you look at a lot of these CFOs now, right? The days of a CFO being kind of an accountant are gone. Right? Most CFOs now are bankers, investment bankers. They're operators. They're really speaking to the investors and really kind of, being a partner to the CEO. And then they leave all the other stuff that I like doing, accounting, SEC reporting, controls, tax, to me. And it's my job to get it right and kind of help scale there. And it's a wonderful partnership that we kind of built. And it all led to a really successful IPO of Grubhub in 2014.
Amazing. So were you kind of in the CFO position and then he came and then kind of replaced you as you prepared for that IPO moment? Is that right? Is that my understanding?
I never want to be a CFO. I like being the number one, number two, right? Yeah. We actually had a director, VP of finance, one by the name of Amy Cooper that led finance before. she was kind of dealing with the budgets, forecasts, and all that. And, I was really accounting hard, trying to get our stuff in place so we can go public. A lot of going public is really getting your accounting right, getting your technical positions, controls, and all that. So that
so much work.
Yeah, it's stuff I like. I'm just super nerdy. So, it always came, natural to me. So that was really my job and really helping, the company get ready to go public. But, I was never in that role. I like supporting the CFO and, we form a great team. And, I always tell people, Lindsay, that the best part of Grubhub is all the other opportunities that it opened up for me, right? Right around the same time I joined Grubhub, I was introduced to a wonderful family. They were two high school girls. They're 17 and 13. And, they were going around buying gift cards for really sick kids in the hospital. And I got to meet them and, really understand what they're doing and really kind of form a foundation called the Holiday Heroes, right? And they were doing this on their own. We kind of formed the charity, formed a board, and really took this thing from a high school project to really a $1 million foundation all across the country that helps kids in long-term medical care and provides birthday parties, holiday parties, joy and comfort and gift cards, and just really helps bring kids at their worst moment. It helps cheer them up while they're in there.
That's amazing. And so that's Holiday Heroes. And so it was just some young girls that were selling door to door that got you engaged. Is that right?
No. So I actually met them outside Wrigley Field. I was going to a 7:00 baseball game. I had a bunch of beers and, I saw a mom sitting on the corner with the two high school girls, Heather and Haley, and they were just asking people for money. And I kind of stopped and talked to them. And, the mom was kind of mouthing off a little bit because I didn't have any money on me. And, I started talking to them like, you guys are doing something real nice. Are you a real charity? And the mom said, no. So kind of, piqued my interest a little bit. And I said, hey, well, why don't we grab lunch? Let's talk about what we can do together. And we just met and formed a board, right? Became a 501c3. And what was super cool was that, the thing really took off because of two things. One, I think there was interest in people getting to know Holiday Heroes because of the Grubhub story. This is like the heyday, right? Raising money, just the number one tech company around the Midwest. Second thing was that the girl's godfather was a Hall of Fame pitcher for the Cubs named Fergie Jenkins. So he's got a statue outside Wrigley Field and he was very involved. So it was pretty easy for us to really meet people and say, hey, come meet Fergie. It's a Cubs player. And everyone in Chicago knows him. And it was great to kind of expand and then just really build a board of ultra networkers. Like if you picture Garrett, our entire board is full of people like Garrett who introduced you and me, right? Together.
Yeah. A total networker, this Garrett. He's delightful. Just loves people and loves to share them. Right. And that's exactly right. Like in nonprofits, everything is relational. I mean, you have to have a really good why and you have to have a good business around it operationally. But a lot of what makes a nonprofit good is the people have emotional intelligence and relational equity, because that's how these things grow. And so had you ever done anything in the nonprofit space before? Or did you jump in
No.
kind of blind, not knowing much?
We had no clue what we're doing. Okay. Our first fundraiser, this was 2010. I think we spent $25,000 and raised $27,000. So we made $2,000, right? And, we didn't know what we're doing, but, we learned from it. And, we probably had 150 people. Fast forward 2 or 3 years later, we probably have 500. And then we had 1,000 people attending our events each year. And, one of the things that kind of worked for us is, a lot of times these charity foundations have a sit-down dinner, right? You get the chicken and you get all that type of stuff. We couldn't afford to do that because we had no money, right? We had no employees at the time. It was all volunteer. Now we have 5 full-time employees, but all we could really afford to do was have like a happy hour, right? And drinks. And we turned this thing into something that was really like a young adult party at the time. Like this is 14 years ago, I was young. But we turned this thing into a really, really popular party that got all the young kids involved. And, fast forward 3 or 4 years, we're in Chicago scene. Chicago Social is one of the hottest parties for charities in Chicago. And, we're getting 1,000 people to show up and, you get the young people in, you get their parents in. We had a lot of sponsors and this thing was making, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in one night of just gross proceeds, right? And, it just really scaled. And what's super cool is we took this idea of, hey, let's throw a big party. Let's get people there and, really just get people in a generous mood. We recently took it to Nashville this past September, right? So that was about a month or two ago. We made over $200,000 in our first nights. really great event. We had a great local board, really kind of took the same model. So it worked in Chicago. Now we're taking it to Nashville and kind of proving it out right now, working in Vanderbilt and really taking care of kids each month and, some surprise and joy in the hospitals to make them feel good.
That's amazing. I love that you're expanding. And right now, the organization, so you say you have 5 employees.
Yes.
How many kids have you guys helped? Like, what are your guys' outcomes so far? Like, do you know some of those?
So what's interesting is when I first tell people about Holiday Heroes, they always think about Christmas, right? There's actually the least amount of kids in the hospital around Christmas, right? Because if your kid is even somewhat healthy, or, can be home, if they can be a little bit, they're going to be at home. So really it's kids who are, in the hospital February, March for St. Patrick's Day or Easter or 4th of July, where there's the highest inventory, right? So the program is really developed not around Christmas. We do some Christmas time, but when kind of the beds are at the fullest and we can really bring our full program in, we probably help tens of thousands of kids, in terms of bringing a program in. We bring in superheroes, we buy food for the parents. And, what's great is we started off in the main hospital in Chicago, which is Lurie's. And then we got to expand to some of the, underserved communities, right, in Chicago, like La Bravita, which is in the South Side, UIC, Rush, and some other areas that don't get a lot of visitors for the kids, right? So the foundation really started to focus on kids who are underserved from visits and kind of other surprises who are in their long term. And these are kids who are, cancer, kidney transplants, just a lot of things you don't wish on any kids. And, when the thing started back then, I didn't have kids. And now I really appreciate how healthy my kids are. And, I still see the kids, just how ill and the parents just trying to deal with their kids and have kids at home. And it just really, some surprise and joy and comfort makes all the difference.
Yeah, it's such a gift to people when they're in struggle to just feel loved. Do you have any stories that are, compelling about it that maybe listeners who want to hear about what you're doing, where, a specific story that is kind of seared into your heart about the work that you guys are doing and how much it mattered?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to choke up on this one. All right. So there's one of the first kids we ever helped was a kid who had a heart transplant, right? And every time we came in, back then we didn't have full-time employees yet because we didn't have enough money, but we'd come to Larry's hospital. His name was Nick, and he had a heart transplant. He was always in there. Every time we went, we'd see him in there, and, his name was Iron Nick, right? He got a $100 gift card. His parents were able to buy him presents and surprise him, just really cheered him up, and he loved when we came, right? He would actually time his treatments around and his follow-ups when he was in there around kind of when we were going to be there, right? And he loved it so much, he started going with us once he was better to visit the other kids, right, in other hospitals, right? He ended up creating a children's book for Holiday Heroes, and he kind of became our poster child of, he'd get up there and speak at the banquets about how, his parents had to work, right? They couldn't always be there when he was sick and he had relapses or whatever it was. And we got to bring him in and kind of really tell the story about how we cheered him up and made him feel good and all that. And, he was speaking at all of our events in 2016, 17, 18, and then, he passed away. So yeah, his body rejected hard. He had he had a bunch of complications, but he fought hard. But he was that one was tough.
Oh, sweet Nick! I love that he had the heart to serve after he was a little bit better, and he went with you guys. That's such a gift. So Brandt, when you guys are, tell me a little bit about your work now. I mean, you're still working with Holiday Heroes. You're on the board, and you're still helping expand and grow and get support there. But tell me a little bit about your new work after Grubhub goes public. How quickly did you transition and change into a new job?
Well, Grubhub, when I joined the company, there's less than 50 people. When I left in 2021, there's about 4,000. I spent, 7, 8 years as a Wall Street officer. We sold the company for $7 billion to Just Eat. So I was part of the exec team there, and I just loved it. I mean, it was, I always tell people the story of, I got into Grubhub at the perfect time, Lindsay. If I would have waited 1 year, they probably would not have hired me, all right? Because they would have had so much money and so much growth. They would have wanted someone who was, 45 or 50 years old. I was 30 at the time, right? So, I had the skill set and I was able to really kind of grow with the company, but, and demonstrate that I was the right person. But, a year later, it wouldn't have worked out. They would have wanted someone with more experience, right? And the other thing I always tell people is, I have so much respect for the CFO who came in there to kind of lead the IPO. He could have easily have come in there and said, look, I think he was 40 at the time, right? He could have come in there and said, hey, Brandt's only 31. I need someone who's been there and done that, right? I need someone who's, 30 years experience. But he's like, look, you got the talent. I'm going to believe in you and I know you can do it, right? So he kind of believed in me. We did the IPO together and it really set my career up and, a lot of great things happened from it, right? I left the company. It was sold in 2021. I joined an amazing startup called Ethos Life. And it was founded by two Stanford guys, Peter and Lindsay, and we kind of deal in the business of life insurance and kind of, really taking a 6-week process of getting life insurance down to 10 minutes using AI.
So cool. Tell us a little bit more about that because having gotten life insurance and gone through, I think 2 different times to switch to a different, plan or different provider, it is so extensive and it takes so much time. It's like really involved. And I understand why. It makes sense. They're trying to see, what risk they're taking on you with your health. But tell us a little about your tech and the AI.
So what Peter and Lindsay found was that, hey, like life insurance hasn't changed in 150 years, right? And what they found is that, look, it's a 5-week process. They got to come over, they got to take your blood, they take your urine, then they come back 5 weeks later. And by then you may not be interested. And it just wasn't very efficient, right? So these 2 guys are really, really, really sharp and smart. They built kind of a software stack and a tech stack that uses your medical records, uses your prescription records, your credit, and they can underwrite you using AI, okay? And they know that the mortality is just as accurate, if not better, than doing it the old-fashioned way, blood and urine, right? So you kind of come in there, you ask a few questions, they pull it automatically, and they say, hey, Lindsay, on a scale of 1 to 100, your health factor is a 91. This is your premium. Would you like to do it? Yes, and you're done, right? So it's a big TAM. Your medical records are anonymized online, right? They know what doctors you visited. It's all online, right? You give consent. We know what prescriptions you've taken, and they can kind of profile you a little bit, right? And kind of ascertain your health. And 7 of the top 50 Fortune 50 companies in the country are life insurance companies, and there's a big TAM, and they're all doing it the old way. And this new way, using kind of how consumers want to be reacted with, is powerful.
Okay, so you made it easier for these individuals to get insurance, and it's a quicker process. So are your clients then the insurance providers? Is that who you guys are selling your software as a service to?
Yeah, what happens is we're like a Geico. Right. It's not all that different than, Uber or Grubhub or Amazon, where we're going out finding the consumer as a marketplace. Right? So I find you, I underwrite you, I sell you a policy from one of our amazing carrier partners, and they take on the risk as soon as it's signed up. We don't carry the risk if the person passes.
And how do you guys currently market? Like, what's your strategy to find these individuals?
I mean, it's a lot of data science, a lot of like, hey, who are the best people who are in a position of need of life insurance, right? Maybe you're looking for babies, right? Or sorry, maybe not looking for babies. Maybe you're just having a baby and you're searching websites, right? Maybe you just got married, right? Maybe you just bought a house. So there's a lot of marketing strategy of looking for people who fall into that bucket, right? And targeting those consumers, right? Now, the other thing that's super cool is, the direct consumer is probably, a large amount of the business, but then there's a very, very nice part of the business where we work with outside kind of independent contractors, where, we'll have tens of thousands of people who sell our product. They have their own website and they'll sign up their clients, get paid a commission every time they refer someone to Ethos on their own. So these could be real estate brokers. These could be mortgage brokers. These could be current, life insurance consultants, right? Who just don't want to go through the old 6-week process, that want to get their clients, underwritten in 10 minutes. So there's a large network that is kind of another chunk of our business.
Amazing. So, you've been in this journey a long time in business and being an accountant. Do you have any like good stories that you can impart for people that are running their business, especially if they're preparing for like an IPO where you're like, hey, this is what I learned. Like if I could go back and, know what I know now, this is like advice I'd give to somebody whose hope is to go public.
I mean, going public, my advice is, really kind of geared around the accounting side of things, right? You really want to flush out all the risks of all the bad stuff that go wrong, right? You want to make sure that you're not going to get delayed from the SEC. You want to make sure you can act as a public company. You want to make sure that you have the right controls in place and you can really tell a good story, right, on that side. And then, as a public company, a lot of it is how well can you use data and, really data science to really help you make decisions, right? And, Grubhub had, 50 plus people who are data scientists who would say, okay, Lindsay, if I offer you a $5 coupon to order or offer you $3 off your next 3 orders, what's the best behavior of getting you to stick around, right? Or, if we spend $10 million this month, and we spend $15 million next month, what's the behavior of that consumer cohort and how does that kind of relate back? And it's really data science and kind of use that to make decisions in the business, right? And kind of scale your business that way. So those are things to me that really are important.
Okay, yeah. So it's just about having really clean accounting. Did you see any, because you started there with 50 employees, what kind of investments had Grubhub taken by that point? Were they like in their Series B or how far along were they there?
Grubhub raised $1 million angel round. Then they raised a $3 million Series A. So they had some money from some local venture capitalists in there. And then really the big round came from Benchmark, which was our Series C. And then that was, a well-known venture capitalist, Bill Gurley, who kind of came in there. We all got to meet him. And, his reputation is up there, probably one of the top 5 best-known VCs in the world. And, just having him be involved. And the great thing is Bill was so involved in our business, right? He put the money in and he was like, look, I'm going to help you succeed. I have the context. I'm going to help you scale. And, he probably spoke to our founders every day.
Wow. That's incredible. And are all the founders still with the company, or did a lot of that amazing CFO that you had such a joy working under, are they still there, or did they move on to other things? Do you know?
The company was acquired, right? Changes happen when the company's acquired. One of the founders left Grubhub after 2015. He actually went on a bicycle kind of marathon around the country for a year. So he kind of took his bike and was traveling around the country, visit all these states, recorded it, made a book of it. That was his passion. And he actually started another company called Fixer. His name's Mike Evans, which is kind of like an on-demand handyman where, you have something broken in your house, you call, they find an independent contractor to come over. So he started that business, which is doing very well. And then the other founder, Matt Maloney, left the company probably around the same time I did to kind of just settle down. And, he spent, 15, 20 years doing it and, moved on, right?
Awesome. So, Brandt, tell us a little bit about, what's made you want to get into accounting and into business the way you have. Like, did you have somebody in your life that inspired you, a mentor, anybody who kind of pushed you into this career? What led you to do what you decided to do?
I have the worst story for getting into accounting if you want to hear it.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right. So I started off as an engineer, right? I started off as a computer engineer. And back in 1997, nobody had their own computer, right? So the only way I could work on programs was to go into the computer lab and then try and hope there's a computer available to work on my programs, right? And I went to Northern Illinois and they only let you sign into a computer for 2 hours and they kicked you out. So I'm coming with my programs at like 3:00. They'd sign me out at 5 and then there'd be like a 5-hour wait, right? So for about a year, I would have to hunt to a computer lab, hope I can get in, if not wait for hours. And, I was going to bed at 1 or 2 in the morning, not because there was that much work, right? Just because, I had to just find a computer that had availability and, they literally work 2 hours at a time, right? It's kind of silly. So, did that for a while. And eventually I'm like, this is just ridiculous, right? I'm not doing this. It burnt me out. I'm like, I'm done with computers and, kind of just lucked into accounting, went to business. I took an accounting class. I loved it, right? I love the theory of how, interpreting a problem, here's the rules, here's how you need to think about it, right? Like, accounting's not debits and credits. It's always like, a lot of it's philosophical and interpretation and what you think and using research and kind of forming opinions on facts and kind of building arguments. And that's things I like to do. So just took accounting classes and loved it, right? And just really, look forward to accounting and, really realize too that a lot of the accounting profession is very kind of introverted, right? So I learned early on that, hey, I like to speak. I'm kind of an extrovert a little bit. And that just played really well in public accounting too. And just had a lot of, things in common with me to really kind of get into that profession and change it a little bit.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's true. When I think stereotypically of an accountant, I don't think of an extrovert necessarily, but I have a brother-in-law who's an accountant. He's been a CFO and, done a lot of great work in different industries, but he's very outgoing and gregarious and loves people and relationships. And so, that paradigm was shifted for me a while ago, but that's cool. I love that you said that it's kind of philosophical. I think a lot of times, for people that don't love math, they don't realize, and I'm one of those that didn't love math, but the first time that I actually kind of fell in love with math was in college in an applied mathematics class that was teaching me about, compound interest and, things that would actually matter in the world, like for my mortgage and for my credit cards, and like understanding how the financial mechanisms and the math behind it would actually impact my life in an applied way. And it changed everything. So I can see as an accountant, because those premises, if you have them wrong, if you have false assumptions in your business model with your accounting, you really can head off a cliff in a business, right? Did you have any examples of accounting discovering something in business that nobody else could figure out and being like, this is actually the problem, or something that wasn't inherently obvious until you applied some of that math, that rigor for accounting?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember when Grubhub was going public, they were really the first public company in the gig space, right? There was no Uber, there's no DoorDash, right? So there's some really unique and specific accounting principles. We had to read the rules and interpret how they apply to us, right? So, one thing that's super interesting is that, the platforms offer you $5 off your order, right? And, we looked at the rules, and the rules are a little bit gray, but we took that position and said, hey, that should be a reduction of revenue, right? I want to bore your listeners, but, we said, hey, that should be contra revenue, right? So some of the platforms, I'm not going to name names, but they said, hey, you offer that $5, that's going to be treated as a marketing expense below the line from revenue. So you could report $5 of revenue, and then below that $5 of marketing, even though it just gave the person $5 for an order, right? So weird things came up in the gig economy. We always want to play it safe and conservative and really kind of, interpret what we think is best. But there's power into helping the CFO think through transactions, think through structuring items and contracts to really, understand what's the balance sheet and the income statement going to look like if we enter this large deal with Yum or Taco Bell, right?
Yeah. That's fascinating. You don't think of these things, but when you're kind of in a disruptor business, when you're doing something nobody's done, there are kind of new rules. It's kind of the Wild West, isn't it? You're having to figure out, how do we frame and contextualize things in a way that are reasonable. So that's fascinating. So Brandt, tell me a little bit about growing up and your world in terms of, have you had a mentor, someone who's taught you something that's really meaningful, that when you were in maybe like the tireless nights, accounting, stressful things, getting ready for IPO, whatever it may be, maybe it was like, I laugh when you talked about waiting in line for a computer. That's so weird to think that we didn't have all personal computers. Like I remember having to do my homework and waiting and scheduling to go to the library to use a computer in college. I was in college, and I remember like when emails were invented when I was in high school and being like, what? An email? And, I still use that as my junk mail today. Soccerita is, because I love soccer. So Soccerita at Yahoo, so like, anyway, it's so funny because we take for granted, I think sometimes today, just how much the utility of technology has shaped our lives, our everyday lives, and our ability to accomplish things. when I think back on, oh my gosh, remember when you had to print out the MapQuest? Well, it has all the details right here on this piece of paper that I printed from home that I got before I left in my car. Just the world that we're in. But just on your journey as you were in this, neck-breaking speed growth and all the things, do you have any mentors or thoughts or advice, for people as far as business is concerned, get through some of the hard aspects or some of the inspiring parts of it?
Well, my mentor in public accounting was an audit partner named Bob Birdie, right? I was lucky where, I think, I had 3 internships at my firm before I started and, got to know him. He liked my style. So I think he just put me on 3/4 of all of his jobs. So, I basically worked for him, which is nice. And, he really, really taught me like, hey, majority of the world are not accountants. Okay. So if you have a technical item, you can't just go up to people and cite literature and say that GAAP 606 says this. You need to present it in layman terms, make sure everyone can understand it, and say, hey, here's a real world example of what we're trying to do, and make sure everyone can understand it, right? So he really nailed that with me. And that's something where I really brought the Grubhub, where I'm talking to, the technology department, marketing, legal, whatever it is. And, I'd say, hey, here's what it's going to look like on the balance sheet and income statement. We're going to have to take a $6 million hit, or this is how we're going to record it and make it relatable, right? Because if you can't make it relatable, no one can understand it, right? It's kind of like a doctor coming in there and, if they give you a prognosis and they can't help you understand it in basic terms, it's not going to do anybody any good, right?
Totally. Yeah, that's really good advice. Like, how do we packetize our expertise in a way that's receivable to people, that it's not their nomenclature, it's not their vernacular? I think that's really, really good insight. What about on a personal level? Who are some of your heroes in life? Grandpa, mom, your wife, you got somebody that you really look up to?
Heroes. You're stumping me for once with the question. I put my faith in God. I think God has really put a lot of opportunities that are unique into my life and really helped me do a lot of good with those. And, just when I thought like I was burnt out public accounting, Grubhub popped open, and then, I had this wonderful opportunity to learn and grow and just really, meet my wife, and just really a lot of things around kind of fate that were his plan that were amazing. Right. So that's my one right there. And then, just to backtrack a little bit on kind of our previous point a little bit, it's very important, I think, for accountants to be relatable. And then really a lot of times you have to tell people, hey, you can't do this anymore, right? You're not a startup. You got to act like a big company because we're going public, and people don't want to hear that, right? So
yeah, I bet you were annoying to some people with your
I upset people.
Regulate.
I upset people all the time, right? And I had to use humor and make it fun to get them to do some things to comply with going public, right? Like
that's really cool.
I have a good story about our engineers if you really want to hear a good one.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
So there was a really, really nerdy GAAP standard around the capitalization of IT wages. And what that means is every time an engineer works, you put a portion of it on the balance sheet and you depreciate it. Real nerdy, but it's a lot of work to get to do it. The last thing the world engineers want to do, all tech companies have to do it, is to kind of look after their time. What projects are they working on? And then what portion's building something new, right? So they hate it, right? They hate it at Grubhub, they hate it at Ethos, and they just don't want to do it, but they have to do it, right? So I remember the first time at Grubhub, I was right out of public accounting. I went to our engineers, well, I had like 5 or 6, and I said, hey guys, we got to start tracking our time and put down projects. Nobody wanted to do it, right? So I told them, look, if you give me the sheets quarterly, I'm going to buy you guys all pizza and pop from Papa John's. We're going to have a pizza party, okay? And then they looked at it, they're like, well, I don't really want to do this, but if I get pizza and pop each quarter, I'm going to do it, right? So got them, and they did a good job. And then our engineering went from, 5, 6 people to 20 to, hundreds, and the tradition stuck, right? So this thing, is if they do a good job and it's on time and I say it's quality and they met all the requirements of GAAP, they got a pizza party, and that still holds true today.
That's hilarious, because I used pizza parties when I was in middle school to incentivize kids to come and help volunteer for the recycling club that I created called the Trash Bashers.
I like it.
So what works for middle schoolers in terms of pizza incentives also work for engineers at Grubhub. That's pretty cool. That's pretty funny. Amazing. Well, I I think what's fun is knowing that, as you've been through your journey in business, you've kind of found the most meaningful. We talked about this when we first met, but the most meaningful thing you do is your service work, right? And you find the most joy from that. Can you share a little bit of by the way, thanks for sharing about your faith. I also have a strong faith. And do you have a certain faith background? Was there a certain upbringing you had around that also kind of instilled in you the desire to serve, and why you find so much purpose and meaning in giving back?
For me, I'm a Christian man. I was raised by wonderful Christian parents who really instilled that, Lord Jesus, our Savior. And, those principles have been, kind of passed down to me from my parents about being kind and, loving and understanding and, really bringing that faith in terms of kind of, it's a word, outward vision, kind of passion to other people and treating people the way you want to be treated. Right. So I think for me, if I'm interacting with someone, even if I'm giving feedback, I try to put myself in their shoes and really try to remember, how I would want to be interacted with. Right.
Yeah, that's really cool. So that's amazing. And that's, it's neat to know that you started that before you even had children, that, as you said, you've probably been so grateful that you have healthy kids, having had a up close front row seat to a lot of kids being in a lot of pain, with different elements being in the hospital. So, what are some big advice you're going to leave your kids, in terms of, if they're going off to college or as they're looking for their career, what things would you give them as concrete things to be like, hey, look for this, know this, any platitudes or powerful things that you want to share with instill in them?
I tell my 8-year-old this all the time, right? Even at 8 years old, you'll see kids teasing other kids, not her necessarily, right? But I try to teach her, treat other people how you want to be treated, right? Someone may be different than you. That's okay. And, treat them how you want to be treated, number one, right? And then two, I always try to teach her, when you do something, if it's basketball, if it's homework, give it all you have, right? You may not love soccer, you may not love basketball. I'm sure she doesn't like sports. We're still working on that. But I tell her, give it everything you have, right? Because that's the way you can really help your team and be kind, right?
That's really good. So you have how many kids, Brandt?
I have two. I have an 8-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy.
Oh, fun. Do you find yourself parenting differently, a boy and a girl? I mean, honestly, do you find any differences, subtle differences in how you approach it?
Well, I was shocked how different the girl and boys are, right? Like the boy, how old are your kids, Lindsay?
I've got 3 boys,
Yeah,
15, 13, and then.
Okay.
Yeah.
The girl always played so nice with her toys and so gentle and soft. Boys, they just break things and put walls. I don't understand. It's night and day difference.
Yes, it's so true. I have a lot of girl envy when I watch these little girls sitting, coloring and doing something quiet and playing with dolls. I'm like, what would that be like?
Yeah.
It's funny though, because you've got an 8-year-old as your oldest, so I've got teenagers now. And I will say that having observed parents with girls that are going through teenage years, I'm like, oh, now it's easy for me because I got these boys who are
I'm not,
they shrug off. They shrug off their emotions. Maybe they have a little attitude. Maybe they're a little indignant, but then they're like, sorry, mom, cool. They just let things roll off their back.
Yep.
It's classic. But yeah, I think I had paid my dues early, I think. So Brandt, is there anything you want to share, just kind of wrapping up here with one of our last questions? What is there anything you want to share with our listeners as, advice or a story or anything about, you've been a part of a historic, successful company that, like you said, was kind of making history, kind of one of the first. Any insights or thoughts about being a part of something that big and anything you gained as a person that might be applied to everybody else's journeys at all? Kind of the esoteric question for you.
Yeah, no, it's a great one. I think really just the importance of networking, right? I'm a big networker. I don't really have much to sell. I'm not in services at all, but I enjoy helping people make great connections, and you never know when that's going to come around back to you, right? And I saw firsthand with Holiday Heroes where we had a board of just a lot of lawyers, accountants, people in sales that just had big networks, right? And, they all would network. I would help them network. And we really formed this group of 10 people who helped each other meet, CEOs and CFOs and grow something, work on something together for the common good, which was amazing, right? And just the importance of networking, maintaining a network, because you never know when you're going to need it, right?
Yeah. So it's all about relationships. I love it.
Everything.
I'm grateful for Garrett for building our connection, our relationship, and for you recently connecting me to some of the team at Grubhub. So thank you for that. I'm just so grateful you came on the show today, Brandt, and thanks for sharing. And good luck with Ethos, and hopefully you have another meteoric success public exit.
2024 will be a big year for Ethos. We'll see.
Let's do it. All right, let's go. Well, thank you again, Brandt, for coming on the show. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Do you need help with the next steps for your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call to schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at www.capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.